Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the afternoon session of NIH Community College Day 2020. For those of you who weren't here earlier when Erica introduced me, I'm Dr. Sharon Milgram, and I direct the NIH Office of Intramural Training and Education. And I'm going to talk about resilience today. In my sort of standard way of answering some emails, but not others, Erica asked me for a title. I didn't answer. She picked one title, and then I picked another one. This is a title that really resonates for me because we're in the midst of this incredibly painful, but also very important learning experience. As a community, as a country, as really as global citizens of the world, we are all watching this pandemic unfold. And one of the things that we are trying to do in this experience is to grow and learn. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I need to start and introduce you to this guy here. This is Teo, and he likes that I am at home teleworking and quarantining, but he is a big barker and he has a loud bark. So if he starts barking, I will unplug my laptop and go hide in the closet and finish my webinar from the closet. That's happened a lot of times. So he apologizes in advance for the barking. So, I started by saying, boy, we are in the midst of this really unprecedented time. And I think it's safe to say that we are all forever changed by this experience, right? Years from now, we will be talking with our friends and family, people about this. We'll be studying this forever in various research formats. We will be talking about the public health lessons. We're really forever changed by this. And I think something important about that is to pay attention and be really intentional that we make sure that something, or really many some things positive, come of it. And some of those positive things will be international alliances and national policy and discussions of public health education. But some of these will be changes that we make for ourselves and our families and our most intimate relationships. And that's in some way today the part I want to address. And I hope that one thing that comes of this for all of us is an increased focus on our wellness and our ability to grow through really difficult times. And so I just want to start by defining what I mean by wellness, and then I'll take you through some concepts around wellness that I hope you can put into practice right away. You can put questions into the Q&A, and I will do my best at the end to answer them. So I just want to start with defining for you what wellness is, which is the active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health. By holistic health, we mean there are multiple dimensions of wellness. And if you notice, this is not just the absence of disease, right? Health is more than the absence of disease. Wellness is an ongoing and regular process. And through that process, we find ways to thrive at school, in work, in life, in our career decision-making, in our relationships. Wellness is a right, all right? We have a right to take time to take care of ourselves, but it is also a responsibility. So taking care of ourselves is a responsibility, not only a right. And the reason for this is these two phrases here that you can sort of file away and remember. And the first is, to do well, we have to be well. All of you are in the process of learning and growing in community college. Many of you hope to transition to a four-year college or university. Some of you hope to transition to the workforce. right? You have big creative things that you want to do. And if you want to accomplish these things in the academic and work setting, you have to be well. So that's the first thing. To do well, we have to be well. The second thing is why I say it's also a responsibility, and that is to treat others well. We really need to be well ourselves. When do we get snarky and mean and lose it with people? When we are tired, when we are hungry, when we are really stretched, when we're not well. And so to treat others well, we need to be well ourselves. I want to give you this model to keep in mind. I think one of the things that makes wellness hard is we get these lists of do's and don'ts, but I find that I need a framework for thinking through those do's and don'ts. So here's a model to think about. And this comes from the work of Dr. Dan Siegel. And if you're looking for some good books to read, he has written some outstanding books on mental health and wellness. And he talks about this window of tolerance. And you can think of it as this zone where we tend to function our best. We can find our creative problem-solving self. We can address interpersonal issues and disappointments with calm and respect. And we can respond really productively in the face of stress. That stress could be an exam. That stress could be applications. That stress could be pandemic stress and the changes in our Thanksgiving and holiday season. In this zone, our nervous system is optimally attuned to deal with stress. And we might go up and down. We might have some times where our stress goes up and other times where we're more relaxed, but we stay within this zone where we can function really effectively. Now, if our stress goes up too much and our nervous system is too activated, we're going to hit this zone out here, the reactive zone. And you could think of that from the perspective of the stress axis as our fight or flight response. Every once in a while, that's a good thing. Sometimes we really need to take quick action to stay safe. But when it comes to something like a frustration in an interaction with our lab teacher, or it comes to figuring out how to find quiet time to study while we're all sharing the house during the pandemic, or it comes to dealing with a grade that's disappointing and we want to go talk to our teacher, the reactive zone is not helpful. Fight or flight is not helpful. We want to be able to respond calmly back here in this zone. Sometimes we get so disheartened, we start to get this feeling that nothing we do will help. And instead of entering this reactive zone, we enter this zone, or the freeze zone, where we give up and ignore the problem. This is where we get a lousy grade and we know we need to do something about it, but we are so disheartened that we can't do anything about it. This is when someone says to us, "How are you?" And we really want to say, "Not so good, and I need to talk a little bit." And instead we say, "I'm okay, thanks." So our goal is to find ways to stay within this zone where we can solve problems effectively, communicate calmly, and productively respond to stress. We don't want to spend time here. It alienates people. It doesn't lead to creative problem solving. And we don't want to spend time in the freeze zone either, because that's where problems accumulate and we don't address them. So that's our goal. And I love to think about it that way because I can imagine me taking care of myself and stretching that window, right? My goal is to make it a bigger window. So the way that we expand our window of tolerance is by taking care of ourselves. And that's what I mean about wellness. And what I found is, while this is a word that is used a lot now in the press, in classes, in meetings, people talk about wellness a lot. I mean, the pandemic has really led us to a realization that we all have to take care of ourselves. So we see it a lot, but I'm not sure we all really know what we mean by wellness. And I know when I was starting my own wellness journey and thinking about taking care of myself better, I needed people to define wellness for me. So I'm going to share with you the model for wellness that we use in the Office of Intramural Training and Education. This is not the only wellness model out there, but we like to look at these 4 dimensions of wellness: body, heart, mind, and spirit, or physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, and spiritual wellness. Now, some people aren't comfortable with the word wellness. And so if that's you and it makes you not want to hear and you're sort of talk to the hand, you know, this word's uncomfortable for me, just replace the word wellness with stress management, right? And in that case, we're talking about how do I take care of my body, my heart, my mind, and my spirit to manage my stress effectively. And we're going to look at this through a quick assessment. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to read each prompt. And number 1, all the way on this 5-part scale, is never, and 5 is always, and 3 is about in the middle. And you can have these slides, so you don't need to write this down right now, or you can take a screenshot when I get through each of the pages. I just want you to pay attention to how many times you say never, how many times you say always. Which ones do you feel like you even need to learn about? What did Sharon mean by that? So we're going to start with physical wellness. I am getting enough sleep, and science shows us that that's about 7 to 9 hours per night. I think there are people who wish it's per week, but it's per night. I am eating balanced, nutritious meals. I avoid excessive use of caffeine. I avoid excessive use of alcohol and other drugs of abuse. I am getting regular exercise, and the American Heart Association and NIH and CDC define that as at least 3 times per week. I am getting regular health care for myself. I take care of myself when I am sick, need rest, or just need a break. So I'm going to pause here for a moment. Where do you feel like I got this one? I generally do pretty well here. Where are you sort of experiencing a little bit of an ouch, right? And where are you in the middle? And it would be good to think about, what can I do to make change? So your sort of bright spots, your out spots, and your need to learn more about spots. And now we're going to do mental health. I avoid getting caught up in perfectionism. Sometimes students tell me perfectionism is a good thing. It's why I work hard. That drive to be perfect helps me in school. And I want to say 2 things about that. The first thing is there's no such thing as perfectionism. It's like an ever-moving target. But the second thing is strengths overused become liabilities. And sometimes really we shouldn't be pursuing perfectionism. We should be moving on, right? We should be doing something else. It would be better to spend 15 minutes taking a walk rather than 15 minutes continuing an exercise that's good enough. So if you think perfectionism is a strength, I just want you to think about it as we move on and as you think about the talk after Community College Day. I focus on the present versus rehashing the past or worrying about the future. If you want to learn more about, well, why is it so bad to ruminate on the past or think about the future, you can Google mindfulness and read about the benefits of mindfulness. That's being in the moment and aware of what's happening for us without judging it as good or bad. Those of us who live in the past are constantly trying to change something that we can't change. And those of us always in the future tend to get really anxious because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so it can be very anxiety producing. I avoid negative or deceptive self-talk, and I'm going to actually talk about that a little bit more at the second part of the talk. The flip side, I practice self-affirmations and positive self-talk. You got this, Sharon. You can do this, right? That's a positive affirmation. I avoid judging myself compared to others. You know, our nervous systems are hardwired to compare ourselves to others. And so we have to slow that down, right? Because we all have strengths and we all have limitations, and we're good at some things and less good at other things and really good at a few things. But we have this tendency to catalog and compare, and we can't see our strengths. We just see others. I give myself time to explore and learn about new things. Science shows us that lifelong learning and hobbies and doing new things is a great tool for wellness. And so now's a great time. If you haven't set up a new hobby over the last few months, now might be a good way to get started. We have a break coming up and a chance to do that. I am open to counseling as a tool to maintain and improve my health and well-being. This could really have been in any of these 4 quadrants, but I just put it here because we tend, when we think about counseling, to think about mental health, but it's really about emotional health and spiritual health and physical health as well. All right, ouches, bright spots, things to learn about. And now we're going to talk about heart health. And by this, I don't mean the great muscular organ beating in our chest. I mean emotional health. I'm in touch with and let myself feel all of my emotions. Sometimes when we talk about this, students will raise their hand and say, I thought the idea was to ignore emotions. And I actually, to be honest, sort of thought that myself. And as I started to learn about this material, I realized how wrong that is. Emotions are incredible signals about what's happening to us. And when we might be in danger, or when we might need a break, or when we might need to correct a wrong. So we need to learn to be in touch with and to feel our emotions so that we can use them to drive decision making. I reach out to others for support when I need it. I communicate my needs and feelings directly and honestly. You can think of that as the ability to be assertive, right? To tell people what your boundaries are, what you need, and make sure you get what you need. That can be in a class and going to talk to a teacher about some accommodations. That could be with your family about your career goals if they don't support them and you'd like them to understand why you're heading in one direction over another. I make time to spend with my friends and family. And that's in quotes because sometimes it's our family of origin, sometimes it's our friends who've become like family, right? We all have different kinds of families. I engage in activities that are fun and relaxing. Our brains have to have a break. We can't problem solve and use our cognitive self all the time. We have to stop and have fun. Then we're more effective later. I avoid extreme use of my phone as a coping tool and avoidance strategy. You know, doom scrolling has become a popular sport during the pandemic. We were too attached to our phones before the pandemic. The sort of double whammy of the pandemic and the election, I think, has made us so attached to these things. And they are incredible assets, right? And with physical distancing, one way of staying socially connected is using technology, but it can become a really negative cycle when we use it without thinking about it. And the last one here, I demonstrate compassion for myself and others. And if you say, well, I'm a great friend and I'm compassionate to others, but me, I'm hard on myself and I'm proud of that, you want to read the science about self-compassion. Self-compassion is an area researched a lot by a researcher named Dr. Kristen Neff, and it shows that when we are compassionate to ourselves, we are much more effective in problem solving and stress management. We have to be able to accept ourselves as human. That's what self-compassion is about. So this is heart health or emotional health. Ouches, bright spots, things you want to learn about. And now spiritual health. I feel connected to something that is bigger than me, however I define that. Some of us find our spiritual health connection through the mosque, the synagogue, the church, the ashram. Some of us find it in nature through music. It's however we feel this part of something bigger than we are. I seek out resources, practices, and activities, people, and places that nurture me spiritually. I reflect on and invest in what is meaningful to me. I read writings or watch media that are inspirational to me. I think of and care about the lives of others who are different than me. I allow time to just be, i.e., I am a human being, not always a human doing. So I can sit and enjoy the sun. I can sit and enjoy my pets. I can sit and enjoy my family, quiet time. I don't always have to have my day filled with activities. And then finally, I engage in activities that support my life's purpose. So I just read a really interesting thing in the newspaper, and it said if we go out in nature, it's really great for our wellness. But if we go out in nature and we focus on finding awe in that nature, like the beauty of the sunrise, or the birds chirping, or the sound the water makes, anything. The other day we were walking in the rain, and it was actually sort of awe-inspiring to see how the rain had remodeled the sand on the creek. But there's something about awe that makes the exercise more beneficial. And so I like to think about that now when I think about spiritual health. So you need to ask yourself some questions. What am I pleased about? What am I not so pleased about? What do I need to learn more about? And what do I want to work on now or in the future? And I want to stress, wellness is not a static one-time thing. We want to pull out this assessment every few months, maybe even more often at the beginning, so we can see how we're doing. But I want to acknowledge something really important. Like I just asked you to ask yourself some questions, so I'm going to ask myself a few questions right now. And the first one is, why is it so hard to do this? It makes so much sense, right? And so many of you are thinking about healthcare and science careers, right? The data tell us sleep and healthy eating and counseling and paying attention to our feelings, that all of those things help us be better at everything and happier, that it's really a positive thing. Yet we really struggle to do this. Why is it? And so I think that question is answered a little bit by the fact that we are all shaped by the cultures that we were immersed in or that we grew up in, and the cultures that we are in now. And a lot of us received messages from those different places we've been, our family and cultures, maybe sometimes things like, oh, don't complain, it's harder for other people, or always smile, or, you know, that's a downer, don't be a downer, right? We've gotten these messages about whether it's okay to take care of ourselves, right? Guys get messages, right? Well, tough guys don't cry, right? Well, how are you going to have emotional health if you can't pay attention to your emotions, if you're told to ignore them? So we receive messages that have gotten in our way in this regard. And I think we also get messages from our current friend and work circle that can make it either easier or harder for us to take care of ourselves. You know, alcohol is not a wellness strategy. How many times do we have friends who pressure us and say, let's go get a drink, right? Taking a walk is a wellness strategy. How often do our friends encourage us to take a walk, right? So we can have friends that really drive us taking care of ourselves and make it easier, or we can have friends that aren't helping. And then I think there's another issue about what makes it so hard, and that is that we're sort of immersed in cultures that drive stigma and shame around needing help. You get this message you're supposed to do it all alone, yet really the honest truth is that resourceful, resilient people use resources. They seek help. They seek support. And we get a lot of messages that that's a weakness to need help. We get messages that it's a weakness to take time to take care of ourselves, right? You should be studying, you should be working. You could do one more volunteer activity that will make your resume look even better, right? We get all these messages to not take time away to take care of ourselves. Lots of stigma in our country and in many cultures and communities around mental health, the belief that is really a shame, a sense of shame if we need to seek help for our mental health. And also we have shame around things that are hard for us. Well, math comes easy to her, but not to me. Or public speaking comes easy to him and not to me. And we tend to have some shame about that. But we are all a mix of things that come easy and things that don't come as easy. And a part of that self-compassion piece I talked about earlier is accepting that. And then sometimes things have happened to us in the past, and we carry a lot of shame around that, whether that be a traumatic experience, the experience of immigration to this country can come with some trauma. Quite frankly, the pandemic itself is a trauma, and we have some shame about why is it that those things are impacting us. We should be able to shrug it off. And so all these things make it hard to do wellness. But the other thing that makes it hard to do wellness is the fact that forming habits is really hard. And even worse is breaking bad habits. It is really hard to break bad habits. So if you want to change some habits, I would encourage you to start one at a time. Not, I'm going to change all of this today. And I like to think about this thing called master habits. A master habit is one habit that drives change and habit formation in other areas. So for example, when I, many years ago, looked at my wellness and said, I don't exercise enough and I'm really feeling the impact of that, I started there. Starting to exercise led me to think about food because I was hungry. Starting to exercise made me pay attention to this inner voice when the coach would say, lift 10 pounds. Oh, I can't do that, right? I started to realize I have this really critical inner voice that tells me, oh, I can't do that. Then I started working on that habit of addressing my inner voice. So a master habit leads to other changes. You should also set yourself up to succeed. We need to pair new habits with old habits, right? So many of us have the habit of brushing our teeth in the morning. I have the habit of brushing my teeth in the morning and then getting my workout clothes right away. It's like, oh, I brushed my teeth, I got to get workout clothes. So I paired a habit that already existed, that's already a part of my routine, and used it to form a new habit. I like to practice if then. If I wake up and it's raining, then I will work out in the house. If I decide I want to turn over and go to sleep, then I will text my exercise buddy and say, are you going? Because once she says, yes, I am, I have a little pressure to go. And that leads me to the fourth thing here, and that is use accountability. And that can be an exercise buddy or a buddy for meditation, just somebody to, hey, how did you do? A buddy to talk about wellness, a buddy to learn about affirmations or compassion, whatever. My buddy happens to be an exercise buddy, but the honest truth is we talk about mental and emotional health a lot while we walk. It's been great to talk with her in the morning about COVID and how she's dealing with it and how we're dealing with it. Sometimes accountability is a system for tracking, a notebook where you write down what you've done. I use my Fitbit as a big accountability tool, right? Any kind that works for you. And the last thing is habit change is hard, so we have to be really kind to ourselves when we miss the mark. We can't say, oh, I missed it, I give up. We have to say, no big deal, let me start. We have to start really small. I missed that bullet. We tend to say, I'm going to journal. I'll talk about journaling in a minute. I'm going to journal every day for an hour. Hard to do. I'm going to journal for 5 minutes 3 times a week. Way more doable. So think of it in your science scales on the nano scale, the micro scale, and then the macro scale. So if we want to change habits, we have to think it through really carefully. Now, there's another benefit of practicing wellness, and that is that wellness is a foundation for resilience, and resilience is what we need to be successful in school, in work, in lab, in life. Resilience is the ability to navigate a difficult situation with intention and ease. It's the ability to adapt and grow through adversity. We are all developing our resilience now as we navigate this complicated pandemic, school online, changes in applications, changes in summer internships, right? All kinds of setbacks and disappointments, and we're developing our resilience. I'm not going to have time to talk about all of this, but if you are intrigued by this talk and you want to learn more, if you go to the OITE YouTube channel, there are multiple talks on resilience. The part of resilience that I want to talk about today is understanding our distorted self-talk. All right, because I find for students in school, this is a really big deal. But I do want to, as we move into that, set up one thing to keep in mind. Resilience is people, i.e., we have to talk to people and be in community, plus process. We have to use resources, plus preparation. We have to be working on this all the time. It's not something we put away. It's a regular, ongoing process. If we want to develop our resilience, there are 4 powerful tools, and I talked about one already: community. We have to join discussion groups at school, study groups in the community. Maybe we find something through a youth group, a religious organization. We need community. Another thing is journaling. Journaling helps us to put together our thoughts and our feelings and to look at what's happening for us. It's private, right? You don't have to share it with anyone, so we can tend to be pretty honest about where we're at. We can see patterns through journaling. We can really work over time to change our responses to things. Mindfulness, the third powerful tool, and I talked a little bit about that. And there are so many free websites for learning a little bit of meditation, a little bit of how to be mindful. And if you have not looked at all at the literature on mindfulness, you should show that it is one of the most scientifically proven tools for improving our health and wellness. So it is really worth looking at. And sometimes we appreciate that we've received so many negative messages about taking care of ourselves and about our self-worth that we are really caught in a negative spiral. And then I can't stress enough how beneficial therapy and counseling can be. And I know that there is a lot of stigma around mental health care. I have worked with so many students who were being held back by really old maladaptive habits that they learned, and the minute they freed themselves up from them, they blossomed and bloomed. In general, you can think that you have these 3 areas to control. So our thoughts, what we think, affects how we feel and act. How we feel affects what we think and do, and what we do affects how we think and feel. I'll give you an example. I took an hour-long walk this morning with my exercise buddy. I started the morning a tiny bit grouchy. There was an email that was a little upsetting. I felt a little bit behind at work. I exercised. I changed my thoughts. I was like, I got to get back and get ready for the day, but I'm looking forward to the holiday. I think I can get work done. All those negative thoughts sort of spun a little bit. Those negative thoughts changed a little bit. Well, my emotions got a little more positive. The exercise itself led to positive emotions because of the endorphins that were released, but also probably because I exercised or walked with someone. And so I had this connection and community. So our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors are all linked together. Improve one, you improve them all. And what we really need to do then is look at each of these. We have to look at tools for mental health, tools for emotional health, tools in the realm of behavioral health. And we've talked about some of that through the wellness assessment. I want to talk about the thoughts a little bit today. Because what happens is we hit setback. We get a grade that we're disappointed in. An internship that we had hoped to do announces it's not going to happen because of the pandemic. You know, we have an argument with someone we care about. Whatever. Adversity happens. That adversity drives beliefs or stories that we tell ourselves. And those beliefs have consequences. If we tell ourselves we're a loser, that C is the end of our dream to become a nurse, then we're going to stop studying. Those beliefs have consequences. These beliefs are the stories we tell ourselves. So A, B, C's, the B is beliefs, and we really need to pay attention to what our beliefs are or what stories we tell ourselves. And when the stories that we tell ourselves are inappropriately negative, we have to learn to dispute them, or the ABCDs. And this is the work of Dr. Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology. And if you want to learn more about this, just Google positive psychology and you'll get a whole lot of good learning. Two things that we need to understand about the stories we tell ourselves: cognitive distortions and imposter fears. And I'm going to teach you about both of these now really quickly. Cognitive distortions are also known as automatic negative thoughts. You can Google either one and you'll get a ton of great resources. These are stereotypical or characteristic ways that our mind convinces us of something that is really not true. And our mind does that to reinforce negative thinking or emotion. At its most basic level, our brain is a threat sensor. And because of that, it has a built-in negativity bias. Our brain is trying to keep us safe all the time. So it is constantly scanning the environment for risk, and it's telling us that things are more dangerous than we think. Things are worse than we think. So we have to understand these cognitive distortions so we can question them and say, well, really, is it as bad as I think? Is that C the end of my dream forever? Or is it a tiny little bump in the road that I need to deal with? Now, the key thing here is I said characteristic ways. So there are about 20 cognitive distortions out there that are talked about in the literature, but here are some that I hear students use all the time. All or nothing thinking. Our performance is perfect or a complete failure. Something is either all good or all bad. So I get an exam back. I did really well in a part of it. I answered some questions in the essay part that were great, but I had a part where I struggled and I got some pretty hard feedback, and someone says, how'd you do on the test? And I say, terrible, it was awful, right? That's all or nothing thinking. Catastrophizing. We exaggerate the implications of a setback or mistake. That C I talked about, right? Oh my God, I'm done. I'll never get in. I'm finished. I won't be able to finish a 4-year college. It's over. That's catastrophizing. Mind reading and fortune telling, they go hand in hand. That's we make assumptions about what someone else is thinking, or we predict the outcome of an event before it happens. Our teacher forwards us an announcement about an award, a scholarship for $500 for community college students. We read, oh, I'm not going to get that. Right? That's fortune telling. We get an email from someone that we care, or we email someone we care about, hey, I want to get together and study, a good friend, and we don't get an answer. Oh, they don't like us. They don't want to study with me, right? They went on to study with someone else. We don't pause and say, well, maybe they didn't get the email. Maybe they're not feeling well today. We're like, they don't want to study with me. That's mind reading. Emotional reasoning. We assume our emotions are a true reflection of the way things are, right? I make a mistake. I feel stupid. I am stupid, right? That's what I mean by that. And I'm going to talk about imposter fears in a moment, right? I feel a little bit like an imposter. I am an imposter. That's emotional reasoning. Overgeneralization. We take one negative event and see other similar events through that same failure. I applied to a scholarship, I didn't get it, I won't get the next one or the next one, so I might as well not bother. Personalization. We hold ourselves fully responsible for an outcome that is not entirely or maybe not even at all under our control. I have seen this a lot with students who are doing Zoom interviews. Technology fails and the student, I'm so sorry, I can't believe that. And they lose focus during the interview. They take blame for technology, right? As if we're responsible for the World Wide Web and global bandwidth, right? And so we tend to take responsibility for things we don't need to take responsibility for. And then the last one is a segue to the next topic, imposter fears, and that's discounting the positive or minimizing. And that's when we discount a positive outcome or our own positive attributes by insisting they don't count or we were lucky, right? Congratulations on getting into that college. Oh, they probably took everyone. Great work on getting that travel award. No big deal. They must have made a mistake. That is minimizing. Minimizing is the cognitive distortion that drives something known as imposter fears that some of you may have heard about as imposter syndrome. I like to use the word imposter fears because syndrome to me implies something is wrong with you. Fear is a normal, healthy emotion that says, ooh, danger ahead. And if you're in a hard class and you look around the room and you think, whoa, this is biochemistry, that's hard. Maybe I'm not ready for that. Well, that's a normal, healthy emotion, right? Right? It's hard. So it makes sense you'd be a little bit afraid. So we're going to use the word imposter fears. That is the feeling of phoniness in people who believe that they are not intelligent, capable, or creative, despite evidence of high achievement. The thing is that imposter fears lead us to feel that we don't belong. But if we want to learn and take risk, then we need to feel safe. And that's what belonging means. So when we are in school and we feel imposter fears, we don't ask questions, we don't go talk to the teacher, we don't join study groups. It's one of the really key things for community college students, first-gen students to learn about, because imposter fears are really driven by being in a new environment. Being a student, simply being a student, is a cause of imposter fears. Being in an environment that feels foreign to you causes imposter fears. So when you transfer to a four-year college, suddenly you look around, it's a new place, right? You're a student and you're in a new place. Messages from family and childhood. Somebody said to you that 90 wasn't good enough. What happened to those 10 points? That message drives perfectionism, and that drives imposter fears. Sometimes organizational culture and messaging can drive imposter fears. A college says, we're an elite group of students. Our scholars are outstanding. And that's nice language. It's supposed to make you feel like you worked hard to get there. But at the same time, maybe it makes you, am I really a scholar? Am I an elite student? Right? It can make us really question ourselves. For students of color, for women in predominantly male-dominated fields, for first-generation students and immigrant students, stereotype threat can drive imposter fears. Stereotype threat is the stress of representing your entire social group. So if you've heard forever, right, Black men don't succeed and get into medical school. And I just read a very disheartening statistic today of the number of Black male medical students there are. So if you've heard again and again, well, Black men don't get into medical school very easily, then you're going to be really worried in your MCAT class or your science classes, right? You don't want to confirm that stereotype. If you've heard women aren't good in math, and how many women have heard that? Lots of us. You're in a math class and you want to ask a question, you're going to think twice before asking that question, because you don't want to confirm that stereotype that women aren't good in math. So all of these causes of imposter fears can add up, right? And we're all, being a student is for all of you, and then all these other ones. And finally, for those of you who work in creative fields, and science has a lot of creativity involved, that also drives imposter fears. Now, here's why I don't want to call it a syndrome. 70+% of people report experiencing imposter fears. So there is nothing wrong with you. You are not alone. These do have to be looked at and acknowledged and worked with, but there is nothing wrong with you. And you are in really good company. All of these individuals here, some of them I'm sure you recognize immediately, have written in their memoirs or talked about in interviews the imposter fears that have gotten in their way. For those of you, this is one that I actually, when I first found it, was, who is that? This is the CEO of Starbucks. I can't quite remember his name right now. This is Sonia Sotomayor, the Supreme Court Justice, Maya Angelou, the amazing author and poet, Madonna. Okay, my son had to fill me in a tiny little bit there on all of Madonna's amazing musical accomplishments. Michelle Obama wrote a lot about imposter fears in her book, Becoming, and Tom Hanks, the actor. But if you talk to 10 scientists, 8 of them will tell you at some point they had imposter fears. They really can get in the way. So let's talk not only about imposter fears, but these other cognitive distortions. Like, so what, right? Maybe these things are good. They make us work hard. And the honest truth is that in small doses, they might motivate us to work hard and to use resources to thrive. If I have a little bit of catastrophizing, that's my favorite go-to cognitive distortion myself. If I catastrophize a little bit, oh, I might not get this money. I have to make this presentation. It's not going to go well. I won't get the money. It'll be really bad for the office. That catastrophizing, if I can keep it in perspective, might make me check my slides, practice, think about it. So in small doses, it might help. But when we let these things grow and they're unchecked and unquestioned, they really can hold us back. They can add to our struggle, and they lead us to self-sabotage. So we don't ask questions, we don't apply to the right appropriate schools, positions, fellowships, and awards. Oh, I'm not going to get in, so I'm not going to do that. We don't volunteer for assignments or for leadership positions. We withdraw from the community. And eventually, if we don't do something about this, we start using unhealthy, numbing out behaviors to try and feel better. Next week in the OITE, we have a mental health webinar on Tuesday on addictive habits and behaviors. And the honest truth is that they are in response to not feeling good about ourselves, right? Very, very often they become part of a negative cycle. And if you want to learn about that, you can join us. That negative cycle of self-sabotage can really lead to poor outcomes in school and internships, in work, and in life. So we really need to wrap our head around how to deal with all of that inner voice or distorted self-talk. Remember, I mentioned that in the wellness assessment, and now we've closed the loop. So I'm going to give you 2 short tools, and then I'm going to wrap up and take questions. And this comes from the work of Marshall Rosenberg, who developed a method of solving conflict called nonviolent communication that is based on the work of real civil rights leaders like the Reverend Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. And he talks about the fact that we can talk like a jackal or like a giraffe. Jackal tears people down, or jackal tears ourselves down. So we can talk to ourselves in a jackal voice. Oh, Sharon, you're so dumb. I can't believe you did that. Nothing's going to turn out okay. Probably everyone is laughing at you. That is really a jackal self-talk. Giraffes have the largest heart in the mammalian kingdom. Look at, they pump blood against a big, big concentration gradient, right? Against gravity. Giraffes have this broad view. So you can talk like a giraffe to build up in a heartfelt, compassionate way. Oh, Sharon, that was a really unfortunate mistake and you don't want to do it again. You don't want to make that mistake again. You should get some support. You need to take care of this. Think it through. Jackal or giraffe, you have some control over that. And then another thing to help is this acronym HATS. You can hear those imposter fears. Oh, I don't belong here. I'm not going to ask that question. People will laugh at me. You can hear that catastrophizing voice. You can hear the all or nothing thinking, right? So hear your distorted self-talk. The A, appreciate you have a choice. You can listen. You can double down and jackal some more. Or you can say, wait a minute, and pause. You can take a big, deep, mindful breath, slow things down. And then the T in HATS, you can talk back like a giraffe. Wait a minute, I'm overreacting here. Let me pause and think this through. And if you can talk to yourself like a giraffe, that can lead to the S part here of seeking resources and using them. Sometimes we don't need that. If we're in the middle of studying and we get really caught in distorted negative self-talk, sometimes we just say, wait a minute, this is not helping. Let me take a deep breath. Let me stretch. Let me have a sip of water. Let me get back to studying. But sometimes we realize that negative self-talk is really getting in the way. And then we want to go all the way through to the S here. I find a lot of trainees that I work with struggle with a really, really fierce inner jackal. So here are some great resources for tackling your inner jackal. And I just want to end by saying we talked about jackal and giraffe, but there's another type of student that I interact with, and I don't mean to imply that these are all on a continuum, but there are some of us who are sort of ostriches. We put our head in the sand, we ignore problems, we tell ourselves stories that are way too positive, and then we miss the opportunity to grow and learn through setback. So the answer here isn't like toxic positivity, everything will be okay, no worries. The answer is calmly pause, talk yourself down from the really distorted negative self-talk and assess the situation. Or pause, realize you're being overly positive and have to address an issue. It's really about hitting the right spot here. So I just want to end by saying we're in a tough spot and it's likely to get worse. We have some really rough times ahead between the winter and the surge and people traveling now, right? I mean, these are tough times. So what happens is we get caught in this, there's a lot we can't control about right now. And we get caught in this place where we want to control things that we can't control. Focus on the things you can control. And that's growing and learning in school. That's doing the best you can to learn this material and take care of yourself. Focus your energy here in the green circle. I love this picture. I have it up on my wall. And sometimes when I get caught really ruminating here over things I can't control, I just say, okay, what can I control here today? And so I think that that's a great tool. And I'm going to end with a challenge for you. I'm going to show you what I call a wellness collage. All of us need reminders for how we take care of ourselves. And for each of you that posts a wellness collage picture on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, this is easy. You're already there. If not, you might learn and see, maybe you'll like Twitter. You need to use these, put at NIHOITE and at Sharon Milgram and hashtag OITE Wellness Challenge, hashtag CC Day 2020. I am going to count up the number of posts of people's wellness pictures, and then I'll make a donation of 25 cents for each post to the Montgomery County Food Bank. And right now we have people in our community that really need help over the holidays. So I'm going to end with my wellness collage. My son and my wife, tennis and biking, and I have maintained both of these throughout the pandemic. It's not always been easy. some things take adjustment. This is me and a very good friend, and we're traveling, and right now is not a great time to travel, but we can sit 6 feet apart in our backyard and plan trips for the future. Can't get to art museums, but I can talk about art. Cooking is a part of my wellness collage. Nature, right? And little kids. This one is one of the hardest ones right now. This is me at Take Your Child to Work Day, and we won't do that in person. Sometimes right now we have to make some compromises to stick with what is in our wellness collage. But I really encourage you to make your wellness collage. If you really don't want to get on Twitter, but you want credit and you want me to make a donation, send me an email. That'll be good enough. All right. So with that, I want to remind you to visit our website and our YouTube channel. We have a lot of really helpful webinars on wellness and career development. We have the upcoming webinar and small group discussion on addictive behaviors next week. We have a resilience series, which you are welcome to join. Please take advantage of our resources. So with that, I am going to take some questions. We have a few minutes. And there's a question here with a couple of votes up about how would one go about finding the right therapist. And it depends on whether you have student health. So if you have a place in your school, a wellness center, you can go and talk with them and they can provide some resources and input. If you don't, you can look online at resources. I can't remember the website right now, but if you just put in your zip code, it will give you a list of therapists in your area. You can filter that by insurance. Your school likely has some ability to support you in that as well. But the honest truth is that therapy is a lot about making a good connection with the person. So we need to talk to them on the phone and see if we feel like there's a good fit. We might want to ask them questions about their expertise. You know, we want to make sure that they're supportive, right? If we're looking for somebody and we want to talk about issues in terms of being in the LGBT community, we might want to make sure that they are LGBT affirming. If we're a student of color, we want to make sure that they've had webinars and training and courses on implicit bias and racism and anti-racism activities. We want to make sure that the therapist is an expert in our area, but also comfortable for us identity-wise. So that is, you know, a sort of short answer to a really, really long question. And somebody helped. The CEO of Starbucks is Howard Schultz. Thank you very, very much. If there are other questions, I'm happy to take them now. I often find people don't want to ask questions during this webinar, even though they have a lot of questions, and we do have a few more minutes. And so I really encourage you to go ahead and ask before we go ahead and break up. Do you know you made a difference? Thank you. You know, actually, right now we are all in this together, and all of you coming makes a difference. So you all make a difference as well. And Christopher once again came through with giving me the phrase or name that doesn't pop into my mind. It's Psychology Today, and you can filter however you like. And the honest truth is I've used that myself, and it's been very, very effective. There's a question about whether we have students intern with us in the OITE. And sometimes we do, yes. And so if you're interested in that, you can reach out and email. Right now, given the pandemic and the fact that everything's virtual, it takes a lot of discussion about what is it that would be really helpful for you. And if it's not going to be helpful for you, then I'm going to encourage you to do something else. Question about how do I feel about manifestation as a practice? You know, It's interesting that you say that, because my wife, I think, uses that tool a lot, and sometimes in really effective ways. And at one point I was sort of skeptical about it. I got into this if-then thing, right? If this, then that. And I get frustrated. I have a very small window of frustration tolerance. And I've started, when I lose something and get really frustrated, if I get frustrated and lose something, then I'm going to sit and take a deep breath and tell myself it'll show up. I have to admit that works. That manifestation really works, right? I'm focused on trying to make it happen, and it does happen. So I'm pretty intrigued by that. Any books you recommend? I love the book Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. I love the book on self-compassion by Kristen Neff. Every book by Brene Brown on shame has resonated for me in terms of my own learning. There are some great books on emotional intelligence. I think that we have a reading list for wellness, and Dr. Barr and I will make sure to email it out to people who register. And in fact, if you think about it right now, there's only so many things we can control. And one thing we can control is reading some books that are positive, right? That are teaching us something, right? And so we will make that happen. And shame on me, well, that's bad language. I'm sorry that I didn't put a reading list at the back of the presentation. My teen has struggled with depression, has been hospitalized in the past. He recently told me he thinks he's gay. I'm trying to be super supportive. Is there a resource to help me help him? Thank you for asking that. I think that PFLAG, Parents, Family, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, is an amazing resource for parents. And it can be a great source of information and resources. And there are many gay affirming therapists out there, and it might be helpful for you to have a conversation a few times with somebody about how you can support him. But thank you for asking that question, because it shows that you really care about your child. Do you know of any counseling resources for someone with no insurance? Mary's Center has 7 or 8 offices across the Metro DC area, and they provide mental health resources for people who don't have insurance. There are also individual therapists who have what's called a sliding scale, and they will work with you to try to make it affordable. But I suggest that you take a look at Mary's Center. Is there anything we can do to motivate ourselves to begin something new that we are scared to do? You know, that's really a great question, and you just did the first thing. And that is acknowledge that we're scared, and then get curious about that. Instead of saying, I'm scared, I won't do it, get curious. Why is that? Am I too much of a perfectionist because I tried before and it didn't work? Right? If it's that you're a perfectionist, like I really wanted to learn how to play tennis, and I started, and then I got frustrated and I stopped, and then I wanted to start again, and I got curious about why I stopped, and I realized I wasn't totally comfortable in the class I was in, and that was making me less willing to try. So I did it differently this time. Right? So get curious about why you're afraid. One part of that can be, when I tried before, what did I do that wasn't helpful? What did I do that was? But the best way to get started is to get curious, not judgmental, but curious about why we're afraid. The second thing is to pair this new activity to something that we love. If I walk for 15 minutes, I'm going to listen to the very best music. I'm not going to listen to that music until I start moving on the sidewalk, right? So we pair something we're not motivated to do with something that we're super motivated to do. And the third thing about all of that is a reward. So I'm going to track and I'm going to reward myself. Not a big reward. And a really interesting thing is an altruistic reward. So not I'm going to give myself a piece of cake, but I'm going to make a $1 donation to something. Because then you watch it add up and it's like, whoa, I just donated $25 because I started to form this habit. So I think those are some good ideas there. How can students learn to become more employable during the pandemic? I think that that's a little bit of a big topic for the end of this webinar, but I guess I would say that a big part of dealing with the pandemic is being very realistic and open-minded and creative in problem solving. And so it might be important to say, here would be my narrow list of preferences if we weren't in the middle of a global pandemic, but here's how I'm willing to expand that list right now. What advice would you give to someone who wants to enter a competitive field but struggles a lot with self-doubt? The advice that I would give is exactly the same as that question about how do I start a new habit that I'm afraid to do. It starts by being curious about where the self-doubt comes from and then addressing it a little bit. You know, one of the exciting things about this material, so resilience is totally learned, it's a learned skill. We're not born resilient or not. We are all born with the capability to learn resilience. The earlier you start kindly addressing that self-doubt, where did it come from? What can I do to soften it? What wellness skills make it easier for me to deal with? The earlier you start that, the less likely it is that this will be like a big bag of rocks forever. And so it starts with this really self-compassionate curiosity. How can we grow confidence, not only as students, but as individuals? One of the best ways to grow confidence is that whole idea I talked about of nanoscale, microscale, macro scale. Practice hard things in small, safe places, right? Smaller, safe places. So asking questions in class is really hard. When you're in a smaller class where it might be safer, try to do it. Or go to study hours and ask your question there where it's even a smaller place. Grow your skills in safer places. There's a question about panic attacks, and I know my expertise and I know my limits. And if you are having issues with panic attacks, you want to reach out to your primary care provider and ask for a telehealth appointment to talk about that. It can be very, very scary, and you really need some support. If you are not sure where to reach out, please send me an email if you don't have a primary care provider, and I'll try to find some of the hotline phone numbers. I'm sorry, I don't have them off the top of my head. Lots of good questions, lots of hard questions, right? Some of the questions really show how hard we're all struggling right now during the pandemic. And I think the thing goes all the way back to what I said at the beginning. How are we going to have some good things come of this? And it's going to be asking hard questions like this and following through. So I would like to end by wishing you all a really safe holiday season. I know that this year we'll all have to focus on making new kinds of traditions. My wife and I will be apart from our son for the first time during this holiday and from family that we normally see. And I know we're feeling that. And I imagine you're feeling those same kinds of hard moments. And so I hope that you take care of yourself. I hope that you stay safe. One day, NIH internship programs will be open again, and I hope that I get to welcome you to NIH. Please reach out by email. Erica and I will get that reading list together. You've been really wonderful. You asked really important questions. So thank you all very, very much, and be well.